Welcome. It's great to have everyone here. For everyone tuning in, I'm Toby. I'm one of the co-founders of COLAB and the facilitator of tonight's conversation. Tonight we're hosting a conversation because part of our aim with COLAB is to drive growth in product professionals through collaborative learning. And one of the ways we do this is through these office hours. So these are aimed at creating a conversation around key product management topics that are put forward by a special guest. And we'll hear about their thoughts and experience on the topic. And then we've got a group of great COLAB members here who will help generate a conversation focused on sharing experiences and learnings related to it. So hopefully everyone who is listening in, but also our members here, will be able to take away some really good takeaways and learnings that you can apply to your day-to-day product work. Now, before I kick off, I want to grab some quick intros from our members so you know who they are. So I'm just going to ask you to give us your name and what you are doing in the product world at the moment and where. So let's start with Matt.
Hi, thanks, Toby. So I'm Matt Dillon. I'm a product manager at TradeMe. I'm moving into a product leadership role recently. So this is right up my alley. And more specifically, I'm working in a very technical area of product. So it's very much platform driven as opposed to experience driven.
Cool. Awesome, thanks, Matt. And Maureen.
Hi, I'm Maureen Bassi, so I'm a head of product at Fergus. And at Fergus, we build software for traders to actually make their life easier and help them to save time. That's me.
Awesome. Lakshmi?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Toby. I'm Lakshmi. I'm a senior product manager at Lay-By. In my current role, I'm looking at the strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. It's a very exciting stage of the company. It's going from a scaling perspective to many different areas. So this chat is completely right on the tongue. That's me. Thank you.
Nice. Look forward to hearing about that as we get going. And we also have Mukti.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mukti. I am a product owner at Xero, and my team works on a platform level front-end technology. So my challenges are mostly from internal teams. So the current thing we're working on is getting everyone to upgrade. We're trying some small experiments to see how we can get them to upgrade faster. Yep.
Nice. Some thoughts on product leadership internally then. And we've got Sahil tuning in from a swimming lesson, which is a great place to be beaming product learning from.
Yes, sorry about all the background noise. Hopefully you can hear me well. I'm Sahil. I am currently a product manager at Impact Lab. We build products and services for philanthropists and charities to measure the value, or the social value of the work that they do. And I'm building all the products myself using no-code and low-code tools, which is an interesting journey, very different from other work that I've done before, but pretty exciting.
Nice. And finally, Jasper.
Hello guys, I'm Jasper. I'm PO/PA at Gather, working in the security and access control domain. So I'm responsible for the mobile related product portfolio. So yeah, security is quite an interesting industry, which is quite regulated and brings some unique challenge in terms of product development and management. So really look forward to today's session.
Nice. Thanks, Jasper. And thank you, everyone. Great to have you as part of this conversation. Look forward to having some of that experience come from your backgrounds. And then finally, we've got a very special guest in Corinna. And Corinna is the VP of Product at Roam, which is one of New Zealand's, I would say, largest and most awarded full-service digital consultancies, but also runs a fantastic product discipline there. and with some fantastic product people led by Corinna. And she has kind of contributed to growing that team to a large team of product managers at the moment, and is going to give us some of her insights into product leadership and the lessons she's learned along the way. But you can also find out about some of her thoughts and ideas on product management at things where she's done speaking for leading the product, and also provides thoughts on her blog, Products and Systems. Is that right?
Yes.
Nice. So welcome, Corinna. Do you want to give us a quick intro, anything to add there, and then tell us about your thoughts on this topic of being real about product leadership?
Oh, where do I start? Thanks, Toby, for the intro. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Yeah, super excited to be here. I know a couple of faces here already, which is awesome. Really nice to see you guys. And I've heard amazing things from all sorts of people in the current and previous cohorts about COLAB. So yeah, just super excited to be here and meet you all today. So you did a fantastic intro, Toby. There's actually, not much to add, really. I guess product leadership it's a huge topic, and it's a very complex topic, and there are so many different areas that we could dive into and spend probably the whole hour or more in. So maybe I'll just briefly share like a couple areas, because I get approached quite often, with questions like, oh, how do I get into product leadership? Like, how do I get into certain, head of product or whatever role? And I usually, I think I disappoint people sometimes, because one of the first things I kind of tell them is, oh, why do you want to be in product? Why do you want to be a product leader? Like, is this really what you want to do? And I think people are kind of like, oh, this is not what I expected to hear. And so myself, I've gone through really the transition over the last few years, over the last 6 years, really, from an individual contributor product manager. That's how I started at Rome. I was the first product manager when we were about 20 people just in Auckland. And then I kind of had this massive transition time into, becoming a manager of a small team of people, like 3 or 4 other product managers as we grew the company. And then today I look after a team of 14 people, I believe. And actually earlier this year, I've put in the first 2 managers, official managers underneath me, who then manage another round of product managers. And so there's really been this like massive transition times in this journey. So I'm happy to dive into that. What is a transition like? I know we have a pretty varied group here, actually, which is awesome. Like some already in the head of product role, or in a new, about to start a new leadership role like Matt, or some people may be interested about product leadership. So I can share a lot about the transition from an individual contributor PM to becoming a first manager, and some of the struggles and joys that come with that. And then also, what does it actually look like then at scale when you now actually manage through other managers? Because that's a very different way to lead as well. And then hopefully, without scaring you all off, I can share a lot about, the sides of leadership roles, and just to make sure that everyone actually has the right expectations going into it, because it can be really rewarding. And if it plays to your strengths, I'm the first one to encourage it. But at the same time, it's just picking the things that you're willing to struggle through as well. Some of the hard conversations that come with, managing people, some of the very confrontational situations you might be put in as a manager. I just really want people to be prepared for those things, because those are the moments where you really have to show up as a leader. But if you are prepared for it, then I'm all for it. So I hope that gives a bit of a broad overview of topics we could dive into. But again, you guys are all in different positions. So I would love to hear, to make it as relevant for you guys as possible, are there any particular topics you've been already thinking about or are super relevant right now for you that you would like to go deeper into?
Thank you, Corinna. I've got a quick thing. So for me, I'm a senior product manager now. it's quite interesting how it's going on with Lay-by, right? So it's a small company and that we want to scale. So it's going to go from an IC role to a people manager role quite quickly. Really good to get your insights on how to manage that kind of scale at the same time, not like honing into the craft of product as well. How can we do that, balance the both things? That'll be really awesome.
Yeah, awesome topic. Can I ask, Lakshmi, so you're currently a senior product manager and you're about to lead a team?
That's right, yeah. I'm just hiring for product managers now. So to very quickly transition from an IC role to more of a coaching role. Just to understand from your perspective, how can I possibly do that very cleanly at the same time, not forget my product skills as well?
Yes, that sounds awesome. It sounds like you're about to have an exciting growth journey. I mean, I'll share a few things, and I hope some of them are helpful. The growth of my team has been a little bit slower than this. So at the start, I was actually able to be a bit of we call it a player coach role, where I do some individual work. Like I still had my products that I was leading, but then I also had 2 or 3 direct reports in the early days. And that was okay. But when it got to, I think there's no magic number, but around the time when I had, I think 5 people in the team, I really struggled to combine both worlds. So now I give people the advice to, depending on that's why I ask how big is the team going to be? Because if it is 6 or more people, it is very, very challenging to combine, leading a product yourself or a part of the product as well as people. And, what I found as it got to that size, it was really hard, especially if you have your own fires to put out on your product, to really take a step back and say, okay, someone else now needs my help, but your own product or project is suffering at the same time. It's super hard to do. And, I have to fully admit that not always did I have the full patience to listening to someone else's problem while I had like all these fires going on in my own initiatives that was driving. So that was really hard to do when it got to a certain size. I can only recommend to really think about, especially when you already know it's going to be a certain size, it's going to be in this time frame. Can you offload some of the work to some of those people you're hiring? So you really have that space to be to support your people, especially you'll be doing onboarding. That's always very time consuming. You'll be supporting them for quite some time. And there's this golden rule that Marty Kagan shares in his product books, is you should at least spend half of your time as a leader coaching. And I've really found myself that if you have your own projects or initiatives to lead, you can't realistically spend enough time supporting your team, especially when they're all new. So that's probably the number one. There's many things, but that's the number one advice. And it's really hard to let go of your own product work as well. I know that. But I recommend to do it sooner rather than later. I hope this helps.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Corinna.
Yeah, and I really like, Corinna, what you mentioned there around coaching. I think that's sort of a skill set that doesn't get highlighted enough in leadership is how to coach, which is different as well, I think, to managing. So I think that's awesome to pick up. Maureen, you had a thought there as well?
Yes, I wanted to top up on this because I 100% agree. My recommendation would also be to start working on trust and relationship with the people you hire. Straight, because this is time you will save up front, because what you want is to create trust, is you want to start creating transparency in your group, to remove yourself a little bit and let some of the topic go. So I would say the earlier you invest, the better, because this can take time depending on the profile you've got in your team. So it's really linked to what you were saying, Corinna.
Yeah, really nice addition. Thanks, Maureen. I also think, the big advantage you have, Lakshmi, is you are hiring those people. So there's kind of this initial trust or hierarchy already established from the start, which is, I think it gives you a good start. You already hire people with that expectation that you're going to manage them. And you can really also shape the team, right? Often managers come in, they have to take on an existing team. That comes with a whole nother set of challenges. So I think you're actually in a really exciting spot.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You have to let us know how it goes, Lakshmi, and hear a bit about it. So how you had a question there from poolside?
Yeah, I did. Actually, before that, I had kind of another specific question. Keen to hear thoughts about, are there aspects of the product management craft that are worth focusing on when you're starting to scale and grow other product managers underneath you? Because the craft is quite diverse. And how do you work out what to focus on so that you have a well-rounded team that is doing the right things in the right way? So keen to kind of hear thoughts that you may, or anybody may have around that as well.
So you mean what skills that you apply as an individual product manager should you double down on when you become a manager of people? Is that correct?
And I guess an extension of that is when you have, I guess you need to do different things when you're managing a bunch of other people. And when you take a look at, I guess when you take the view of the company expects different things. So like how do you create value and make sure you do the right things?
Yeah. So it's a great question. I think there are a couple areas to it. On the more tactical side, the more you move up, the closer you get to the business. That means the more strategic you have to become. So if you look at an individual product manager, I would really recommend to get a good understanding of how the business works. And, as you move up into a product leadership role, how important product is and the initiatives that you're driving to the wider business goal. So really that strategic context is going to become a lot more important than, maybe the managing your backlog or other more detailed tasks of your previous role. But I do have to say that overall, it's a massive transition, and I underestimated it when I went through it myself. Really, it is. It's almost like a completely new skill set. Like you're not managing a product anymore. In a product company, you would still manage obviously the product vision, and that's why I'm saying the strategic part is really important. But really, especially if you take that role seriously, you do that 50% of your time minimum is spent on coaching. You don't have to be the absolute expert in all the different PM skills anymore. Now you actually just have to listen to people, take feedback well, try to be supportive, try to give them the right context, and kind of, you're now leading through other people. And that's a completely different role. And looking back now, I would have wished I would have focused actually more on my soft skills rather than, on certain skills of my PM day-to-day life.
I really like what Sahel you mentioned there around coach. What skills would you coach in product managers? And so what are you concentrating growing? Matt, Mukti, Jasper, feel free to chime in here. But Matt, I was interested just to hear on that point whether you have had people coach you on particular skills that you've been really happy with, or there are skills you think that are really key that a leader coaches product managers on. As Corinna kind of mentioned, there's some soft skills in there, but are there others that you've sort of found as well?
Sure. Yeah. The keys, it's interesting the journey that I've been on because I'm working in a very technical space. So working with platform teams is a little different from working with experienced teams. Mm-hmm. And as such, we don't really have that many product managers in the technical platform space. There are a few in a few of the squads. But many of the people that I'm having to that I am working with to bring up product capabilities in our central engineering team have generally come from technical backgrounds. They're generally principal software engineers who are responsible for, I guess, technical product management. So one of the things that I've really been focusing in on is getting really clear about our customers. Who are our customers? Understanding who they are, and using techniques to understand the difference between what a product person sees as who they think the customer is, and then actually who the customer really is. So really making sort of some comparisons between what we think we're dealing with and what we're actually dealing with, so that our internal product people can, I think, really make a better connection and have a better understanding about customers and the problems they're facing. So that's my first goal, is to get people to understand their customers, and the problems, before we start to move into, okay, where are we, we've got, because we don't want to just build tech for tech's sake. We really want to make sure that we're delivering valuable outcomes.
Can I ask, Matt, how do you communicate? Because I understand your platform team, so that's kind of internal, and then other teams would leverage that platform. How do you communicate that wider business impact they're having with the team? I would love to hear that.
I'm yet to find out.
Oh.
So it's a really interesting journey. This has been the last few months. The role has changed for me. It's moving from a product manager to a product coach or leader. I'm not really sure the title, to be honest, yet. And it is a really interesting mindset shift from being hands-on and getting things done to how do we get things done, and how can other people get things done. I must say it's been really enjoyable, because, and it took a few days, maybe a week or so, to really flip that switch. I'm sure that it'll continue for a while, but and it's really exciting to think about how, well, it's not just exciting, it's actually it's really hard work to frame a whole, how do we improve our technology, the words going around at the moment are platform as a product, becoming more product driven, and really ensuring we deliver real customer needs from beforehand.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge. And yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to with as a product leader, now you're becoming a lot more strategic, right? You have to think about, connecting the dots is really what you need to do now. You're not being given tasks or different priorities already, but you have to communicate with your team. What you're doing in the day-to-day is important, because it leads to whatever outcome we're trying to drive for the wider business, and connect the dots for them. And that's really that strategic leadership that you have to bring in. So it's, I think it's even harder for a platform team, because you're one step removed from the end customer.
Yeah, I'm getting my head around that, which is good.
Yeah, good
I'm really keen to get your insights on, I guess I think it's the key skills. Maybe a wider question is the key skills between a product manager and a product leader or a product coach. Get your thoughts around that. It's what I've heard so far. It's been really interesting. So more of that, please.
I like your honesty as well. That's kind of, the doom and gloom message that I sometimes send. It's hard, but it is rewarding. Just know what you're in for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that, and Matt, some great thoughts there. In a company like TradeMe, which does have great product leadership, and in terms of how you're growing into that role. I want to touch on, Jasper, you had a great question there, and Corinna, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, as well as from the group, which is around product culture, and a great question around what is product culture mean to you as a product leader, and how important is it to sort of establish that as a purpose for your team and the organization, and what's your sort of role in that?
Love that question. Yes, so I have definitely seen this as probably the most important part now, is setting the culture and supporting people in that product culture. At the start, though, when it was just 2 or 3 people in my team, I do think it was easier in a way where, you know, you kind of sit near each other and you work super closely with each other. So I do think culture happens more naturally, right? By just kind of working alongside each other and being quite involved. But then definitely as the team grew, I had to make a lot more of an intentional effort to communicate and share and create a specific culture. You know, things like setting team goals and a direction for the year. Those were things that I haven't been doing at the very start, because it was a lot more like hands-on. When you are a small team with 2-3 people, you know, it just happens a lot more naturally. And then especially as your team grows, you just have to really think about, you know, how your team makes decisions like that. That's a big part of culture, right? How your team behaves when things when you're not in the room. Because one part is me telling people, you know, you should do X, Y, Z on your product. But then if I would stop telling them that, have they actually created those habits themselves? Are they making decisions that are aligned with the values of the company, the strategy of the company? Like those are all those fuzzy bits around culture. And so, yes, it is hugely important, and it just becomes more and more important as your team grows, and you just have to really set aside time and put in intentional effort to set a direction, to reinforce habits that you want to see in the team. And then also in the day-to-day, you know, to give people praise if they act within that culture, but also call out when people aren't acting within that culture that you wanted to set for the team. And that part leads me to, you know, some of the really difficult bits in product leadership, or in general, I think in leadership positions that not everyone always talks about, but when you do have issues creeping in, you know, and sometimes it is even one person in the team can really have a huge impact on the wider morale. You know, if you have someone who is really not aligned with the vision, and rather than, you know, disagreeing but committing to that vision, they just like keep bringing it up in public forums, you know, it really brings down morale. As a leader, you just have to step in there and call out those things that are not aligned with the culture that you want to create for the team. And that is probably the most important part you can do, really, is in the day-to-day, making sure you enforce, you praise the right habits, but you also have to call out, even though it's so uncomfortable to do, and also call out when, you know, certain behaviors are shown that just aren't aligned with the culture you want to create in your team. Does this answer your question? Please do let me know if you want me to elaborate or explain anything else.
Yeah, very good answer. Thanks. Also, how did you handle the, I guess, when you want to establish a purposeful product culture in an organization which haven't seen that happening before? So how hard it is to get buy-in from other stakeholders, like other functional disciplines, or even like the higher senior leadership.
Can I just confirm, you're talking about product culture as in like the culture in my team, or is it more about having a product mindset in the wider company now?
The wider company, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, also a great topic. I have found through my journey that a mix of top down and bottom up has worked really well. We work at part of what we do at Rome is working with a lot of different companies who typically don't have that product culture yet, right? They are maybe a financial services company or an engineering company, and they're really good at what they're doing, but they're not a technology or software company at heart. So they usually don't know what product management is, and there's a lot of education that we have to do. And we do find that the companies that don't have that top level support of, you know, yes, we need, you know, this is how we need to work because markets are changing. We need to adopt modern product management techniques to stay competitive in the market. If that top-down support isn't there, it's going to be a hard time. And I haven't seen in 6 years, you know, companies that without any top level support, it's a really hard battle to fight. but then assuming, you know, there is buy-in from especially the CEO and the top level that, you know, they want to change the way they work. I also find it extremely effective to actually have that bottom-up approach mixed in, where you find advocates throughout the company and you build really strong relationships with peers, you know, with the engineers, with the designers, and with the sales team. That's a really hot topic that a lot of PMs talk to me about. You know, really building those relationships, showing them the value and how you can support them, and not going at it with a, you know, I'm the product manager now, we're introducing product management and the product culture, I'm here to make all the calls. It's really, you know, how can we help align the whole company on the right things to build to create real customer value, which is ultimately everyone's goals, right? Like whether it's a sales team or the design team or whatever. So a really collaborative approach mixed with that top level support is key, in my opinion and in my experience.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on that point there, Corinna, which is those allies in the business.
Yes.
I really, really like that point. I think it's a critical part of that role is building those relationships across the business. Marina, I saw you had a thought there. Did you want to add to
on this? Yes, I wanted to ask Corinna her opinion, but there is an aspect of ways of working and having them define upfront with I mean the business, and having a bit of ways of working, the foundational aspect of ways of working documented somewhere so people can refer to this, which actually usually help with senior leadership or stakeholders. I'm keen to get your view on that one.
You broke up at the start, so I just want to make sure I captured that correctly. You mentioned the documentation and the importance of that when
no, I mentioned ways of working and documented ways of working.
Ways of working as in the product management team and the best practices and frameworks?
It's more actually not only product, it's how do we work together in a company? How do you work with engineering? How do you work with design, role and responsibilities, the way you're building software, your different kind of phases, because calling things in the discovery state is kind of really important for stakeholders to understand. It's being discovered. It's not something we're actively building and delivering. We're still understanding and exploring. So there is a part of being able to document these kind of ways of working for senior leadership to understand and to create this culture and to better collaborate.
Yeah. Is there something I'm just curious, is there something you're currently going through, or is it a particular situation that made you ask this question?
That's something I've done. And what I found is by not having the kind of foundational blocks to help, it's really hard for non-tech people to understand what you're trying to achieve. So having this common language, this common vocabulary across the business of what we mean. What do we mean by a beta, for instance? This type of releases. What do we mean by a discovery phase? What are we trying to achieve? And what is the difference between I don't know, in terms of accountability, an engineering manager and a product manager, and all this type of description that would help everybody in the team to work together and understand who to talk to and the different processes. And I actually found it difficult to create a culture if you don't have this kind of foundational block in place.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And what I found is, sometimes you just have to give things names as well to have something memorable, that people can then repeat. Like a good example was a while back, we discussed, what should we do for road mapping, like what framework or what tool or what format, like, how do we do roadmaps and in the team. And so we had a lot of great thoughts from various people, and we all collaborated and we came up with this new template and ways of road mapping. And then we presented it, and everyone's like, oh, this is great. This is awesome. Makes sense. And 2 weeks later, I asked a few people, like, oh, what about, our new roadmap template and our new ways of doing roadmaps? And they just couldn't really recall, what was that framework and, how did it work? Because we actually didn't give it a name. We didn't have this high level, this is what it is. We went straight into the details. And then now we're using a now, next, later approach ultimately. And it's so simple. It sounds like, I'm giving you the most simple advice here, but really just naming it, hey, we are doing now, next, later roadmaps. This is how we do roadmaps. It's like, okay, this is not something that I've seen other people repeat to other people in the business as well. And it just made all the difference. So I'm all for documentation. Yeah, having those reference points that you can keep sharing as well. Giving something clear names, like, what is the discovery phase? What do we mean when we say about discovery? What is the difference to delivery? Like, those are just absolute fundamentals, especially to other stakeholders who haven't been in product, because we're very guilty sometimes in the product community. We're all such, framework geeks. And we throw those names around assuming that everyone knows. Not everyone knows. So really taking a step back, giving it clear names, repeating that, reminding people, remember, we're using continuous discovery techniques, and we're using a now, next, later roadmap, and this is why it's important. It's super helpful. So what you said really resonated with me, and I would agree that this is super important.
Thank you.
I'm going to go. So Hal, did you have a quick thought there, and then I'll call on Lakshmi?
I actually had sort of like a follow-on maybe question, which was, is it just better to do this sort of documentation or working out how we're going to do these things one step at a time? Or, obviously it's contextual, but is it better to kind of establish the major parts of the practice at the start, so that everyone kind of has some form of foundation to build on? So that was kind of, a thought. I don't know what you think.
Oh, I love that thought. it's I've thought about this a lot as well. I think it depends on the maturity and the openness of the business. Ultimately, change is uncomfortable. And so that's the main thing I always recommend people to remember, is when they, come into the business, talk to the board or whatever, and say, oh, we need to work like Amazon. We need to do experimentation, and we need to do all these prototypes that we can then quickly throw out if they don't work. And the business stakeholders are like, whoa, hold on. Why should we spend money on building something that we then throw out? Like, it's just a complete shock to the system. So just be really empathetic with how hard it is for people to change their thinking, to adopt to different ways of working, or different ways of working for their role as well, right? Especially a CFO. They're there to manage the risk and the profitability of their company. They don't want to hear that you spend time on prototypes that you then throw out, which is against their nature. So just be empathetic with change, and how hard that is for people. And then depending on how far away they are from that ideal state of where you want the company to operate in, if they're really far away, it is a really step-by-step empathetic process that I recommend doing. If they're super open, especially in crisis mode, can be really good. If a company is, at an existential crisis, they have massive competitive threat, they kind of know, either we change or we're out of business. That's probably when I recommend just go, all in, because at that point, people are really open to change, because it's kind of like the last straw.
I think on this note, it's about being able to coach people to deal with uncertainty a bit more, and a lot of especially at the exec level, might not be really comfortable. And your example to CFO is a really good one. Dealing with uncertainty and hypothesis-driven development is hard. And it's where good practices and fundamentals come in place.
Have you found something similar or different? I'd love to hear some.
No, I totally agree. That totally makes sense in terms of maturity level and risk appetite. both at an organization or at an individual level as well. So working that out and then just managing it. It's spot on.
Yeah, nice.
Nice. Those are great thoughts. And Lakshmi, did you have something to add to that, or come to you? And then after that, I've got a question from those who are listening in. Great to have some people checking in on the live stream and listening to the conversation. So thanks for that question that's been passed through. We'll ask that next. But first, Lakshmi, did you have something to add or a particular question there?
I just had a very similar thought to what Suhail was having as well, in terms of done both ways, gone product, everyone knows what's happening. And there's like a new blog post every day, a Medium article or a book, and you just kind of go in and start doing everything. So what kind of maybe for the whole group is worked for me is going lean, just starting with one step at a time, just creating discovery. And what really worked as well is to put pictures. Just put one pager as to this is how we do a product. And if it works, we'll carry on. If it doesn't, really keen to know if anyone has tried that, or would you think that's the best way to go?
Yeah, I love that. A one pager for how you do products.
Yeah, and then we can add, right? We do lead by example, just do MVP, see how it works. Are we creating value? And look at some metrics, OKRs, anything that the company works on. And if we see value, and that's a really good way to get buy-in from high up when they see the results rather than just a lot of words. Then once the software gets produced and it works and the customer loves it and some feedback comes back, and then magic happens.
Yes. I love the one pager because my poor product team has me jumping in there and saying, we should try all these things. I've got new ideas. And they probably groan as I think about new ways that they could run product. But yeah, I'd love to hear, Corinna, but also from everyone else on that thought, the one pager for how you do product. How do you tackle that?
I can go. So I think one part, we talked a lot about the education part, but I think actually you just actually touched on the other big part of that, which is also the actual, showing the value and the impact. So if we do those things that we have on that one pager, what does it mean for the business? And really, again, connecting the dots, right? That's where, as a product leader, you have to really step into that strategic dot connecting position where you try to really speak the business language as well, right? And like show to the CEO how maybe let's stick with the example of you want to introduce more hypothesis testing and experimentation and user interviews, those kind of techniques to your discovery processes. Well, think about how this is important for the wider business stakeholders, right? And so if you're able to define the actual link between the problem you're trying to solve. So let's say there is a acquisition or funnel drop-off problem in your product. Don't just talk like in super high detail about that particular funnel point and that UX issue that could be causing this. Like the board doesn't care about that. They care about what does it mean for the business? How does this impact our strategic goals for the year? So maybe you can find a link to, if we are having this conversion issue, we have 50% drop off at this point. This means we'll have, this will impact our monthly recurring revenue or whatever, like something that is really clear in terms of the business language. You can really connect the dots for them and say, okay, let's find ways to solve this problem that could affect our monthly revenue goals. And we think we can solve this problem by testing a few things before we roll it out to production. And that just really creates that link between product and the business. I often see this like massive gap. So yeah, one part is education. The other part is actually finding that link to the business, speaking the language, and then hopefully, you've done a few tests, and then in the end, you can iterate back to them and say, look, we've done all this experimentation, we've rolled out that feature, and now it has led to a 10% decrease in drop-offs or whatever, and this is the business impact it has. So really, don't just educate, like actually close the loop, and reaffirm to the business stakeholders that all those changes you are introducing are having a real business impact. And that's what's going to create these like long-term habits, because next time there's a problem, they're going to say, oh, remember last time we did this with experimentation techniques, and what about doing this again? Then they'll be a lot more open to it. So that's kind of my 2 cents to add to it. It's not just the education part, it's also the reinforcing and showing the business impact of what you're doing.
Absolutely. Love it. Thanks, Corinna.
All right. I'm going to jump to a question here for the group and you, Corinna, from online, for those streaming in, which is, and I think to your point, closing the loop quite nicely on this conversation, which is, what are some of the most challenging parts of product leadership and how did you overcome
them? Love that question also. It's definitely the moments that no one can really prepare you for. It's when someone in your team comes up, and I've had all of these situations before in my 5 years roughly as a people manager. For example, people come up to you and ask, why did you promote this person and not me? Or having to go through a performance management process with someone, finding an exit agreement with someone, someone just telling you they don't agree with the strategy or where this company is going at all. Those were the moments that at first, I was just quite overwhelmed in that moment. And again, no one can kind of prepare you for it. But what really helped me overall is, I think, just staying, and this sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes removing yourself from that emotion as well and just staying super rational. And I actually think, I've done a lot of self-reflection over the years in terms of, is leadership, is it actually the right thing? And I really think that part especially plays to my strengths. And I think this is why I am effective in what I do and why I enjoy doing what I do, is because I can actually separate myself sometimes from the, emotion of a certain situation and can just assess things for as they are. And I also I'm not like a people-pleasing person. I'm okay if sometimes people don't agree with what I say or don't like me, because sometimes, again, if you're having those hard conversations, the other person will very likely not like you in that moment. And you just have to be okay with that. So I think, and again, this is why I always ask about people's motivation. Why do you want to be a people manager? What's your personality? Like, are you okay with these things? Because in those moments, if you're there to be liked, you're going to make some of the worst decisions. And for example, if there is a culture issue in your company or in your team, and you have to call out someone's behavior because this will then send otherwise a signal to everyone else in the team that this kind of behavior is okay. In that moment, you just have to be okay with not being liked and have that hard conversation. And that is the most important thing you can do as a leader in those moments. So I hope that answers the question about the difficult situations.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, and some great examples of those difficult parts they're almost not product related. It isn't solving what is the customer problem or how do we get more analytics. They're real human problems, which become part of leadership. So I think some really nice insights there. Interest as well from the group, Marine, sorry, I know you're in a leadership position. Matt, as you're moving into that, or others who have been, with leaders or you have managers, interested to hear what you think some of those challenges are in product leadership.
A lot.
Yeah.
I can relate.
A lot, and especially when you're coming from, even worse if you've been a developer before and then you move to product management, and then you really move to more leadership role, and you have to remove yourself from the detail. And there is an aspect where I'm actually coaching my team on two specific things at the moment, which I think would be relevant. But it's about the level of detail you need to go to, and then removing yourself from the detail, because you don't, as product manager, you really you don't want to spend all your life in the detail, in the backlog. So it's really this ability to zip and go understand and removing yourself and actually build a plan. And that's actually you acquire by experience, by getting it wrong, and then you get better at it. And the other part I'm kind of trying to help is the level of resilience, because product is central, and there is a lot going on. There is a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration, a lot of people, a lot of voices in the room, and the level of resilience, something that you grow with your experience, right? And after a couple of years, you might have different, or even a couple of months, you might have different reaction based on what's happening in the room. And this is hard. It could be a bit challenging, but then you know how to let go on some difficult situation and some difficult stakeholders as well.
Yeah, similar for me. I think it's those core skills of being able to engage with people and not get drawn into those personal, emotional space. Sure, everyone gets emotional, but that's acceptable and understandable, and that's fine. But being able to, I think, confidently and clearly be able to have a clear direction, being able to tell a good story, to bring people on that journey, to inspire people, all those things that we hear about and talk about, I think are really key for leadership, regardless of product or any other kind of area. So those, I think, in the early days, having managed people earlier in my career, there are some really good lessons. And then, I mean, I think a big part of product leadership, or any kind of leadership, is around being able to help people and build people's skills, whether they're junior or intermediate or senior. And I think it's the case for anyone, but really being able to guide juniors to build their skill sets, and to guide intermediate product people to say, hey, strategically think, more strategic thinking. And I think that's a real part of the leadership, the leadership role is generally people, and of course dealing with issues and many issues that we have.
Yeah, I can relate to everything you just said, Matt and Reem.
Yeah, great thoughts, and I think touched on some of those key parts of leadership. And Corinna, what you've been talking about in the conversation, I think, has been fantastic. Touch on things like coaching, which is that key skill in leadership, product leadership. I love the concept of closing the loop, especially with those senior executives that as a leader you have to speak to and bring on that journey. And it's not just about talking to them, it's about bringing it all back and kind of closing that loop. And then this final part about some of those challenges and those tough parts of leadership, which, as humans can be hard, and you have to be able to sort of step out of that emotion sometimes to be able to make rational decisions. So some fantastic thoughts there. I wanted to close it up by asking you, really what is your favorite part about product leadership, and a reason you think people who are looking to get into product leadership might love it and find it's right for them, to kind of close up this conversation.
Yeah. Well, so there are two types of product leadership that I think people should consider. One is the more people management path, and one is a more, you love just managing products, and it's okay. Like you can, like an engineer, you can be a super specialist PM, like just managing really complex, global, large products. That is fine. So that's kind of the first thing I tell people, like your only way up is not to become a people manager. If you do, if you're talking about product leadership as in like managing people, then that's awesome. But remember, there is a second part, you can really become a really successful product leader without having to directly manage people in your team as well. So that's probably the key fundamental part. If you are going into the people management role, though, I do think it's hugely rewarding, and sometimes those rewards are not direct or don't come instantly, right? Sometimes you hear someone say to you, a year later, hey, what you said to me that day, I remembered that, and today I used that in, my meeting with XYZ stakeholder, and it really helped me. And those moments are just absolutely like priceless. And so in that moment, sometimes it feels a bit like a thankless job sometimes, but the most rewarding part is really the impact you have on people in the long term, especially if you have more junior people as well. You're actually shaping, the basis of their career. It's actually a huge responsibility, which it's probably best not to even think about because it's really scary. But yeah, those rewards are just huge. And in my opinion, they are really worth all the struggles and all the difficult conversations you will have on the way.
Yeah, really nice thoughts there. And I think some fantastic parts of product leadership, especially those two paths, which I think are really important for people growing into product leadership. All right, we are almost at time, unfortunately, which means we have to wrap up this conversation. But massive thanks to all of the COLAB members who joined in this conversation. Fantastic to have you contribute. And of course, Corinna, thank you so much for joining us and coming in and sharing some thoughts on product leadership. It was great to have your insight and input tonight for this conversation. If anyone listening
thanks for having me.
Oh, it was a pleasure. And for anyone who's listening in or watching, if you think there are some great people out there who join a conversation like this, let us know. We'd love to have more people join us to have some of these kind of collaborative conversations where we can learn through those experiences. And then finally, if you do want to find out more about what COLAB is doing, you can follow us on LinkedIn or check out colabcohorts.com. Otherwise, it's been a fantastic conversation from everyone. Thanks so much for the insights. And we will see you at the next one. And if you do have feedback actually on this, we'd love to hear it so we can keep improving this platform to provide more insights for everyone out there. Otherwise, good luck. As Corinna says, product leadership and product is hard. So keep doing great work out